Hey guys, it's SD, your host of the Life Picks Relationship podcast, where people with all sorts of backgrounds, challenges, and life experience show us how they make their relationship extraordinary. Hey guys, hope you're having an awesome day and are practicing those tools Brendan gave us on the previous episode on how you can make those hard conversations a tiny bit easier. I found it really insightful and I hope you did too. And in case it wasn't so your speed, then maybe today's guest will be able to help you because she does CBT, DBT, EMDR, and expressive arts. Mandy Morris, thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited because I also do expressive arts and I love to see what you do, if it's similar, is it different than me, and just how it works together. Guys, you can follow Mandy on Instagram at therapist_Mandy or on TikTok where she got some really good stuff at Mandy_therapist tips. Now, Mandy, I'm really excited. Let's get straight to the part that I want to know most. How do you incorporate everything together, especially the expressive arts?
Yes, it's always really interesting. A lot of times, depending on the situation with couples, I will maybe recommend that they both start in some individual therapy and then we come back together and do couples work, depending on what's going on. If there's some serious stuff going on in an individual that's affecting the relationship, like an addiction or other sort of mental health thing going on, then that needs to be treated on the individual level, because the idea is that two healthy people will make a healthy relationship, and then we come together and do the marital work. Well, for a couple of my clients who are into art and into photography and things like that, I talk with them about how sometimes a big part of healing can be more powerful and more profound through expressing ourselves in creative ways, because it hits us at a soul level. We're born creative. You don't have to teach kids how to be creative, but as adults, we kind of lose it along the way sometimes. And so when we can reconnect to that, it's like a deeper part of ourself expressing what it needs to express and in a safer way. So like for instance, as an example, I had a client who is really into photography. So I was assigned homework throughout the week, and then she could bring it back and we could process it in therapy together. And it would be to like take a picture about how you feel about the relationship, if you could capture it in any sorts of way, or just how you're feeling in general. And man, talk about some powerful pictures that she would bring back in, different trees that looked like half dead, half alive, and just the processing that happened around that, and really became a healing way for her to stop stuffing what was really going on or numbing what's really going on, and then doing art around how she wished she could feel and hoped she could feel. And then that gives us avenues to work towards it. But that stopping and reflecting in a creative way creates such a deeper meaning than words can. And it's so much more healing. I mean, there's tons of research on how art has therapeutic benefits, and actually, there's a lot of evidence-based stuff on art that, I could bore you with all the details of that, but it's really profound and powerful. And then even in my session, we will do art together sometimes, and I'll lay out a piece of paper, and I always tell people, hey, it's not about the quality of your art. I'm giving you like a time frame, and the idea is just to kind of unlock the subconscious, because what we're doing right now, talking, this is all conscious. We're in the present moment, which is only like 10% of our brain. The rest of it is all subconscious stuff, which is long-term memory, things that you're not consciously thinking about. And so when you give someone an art directive and you say, don't think, just do, that their subconscious talking, and we're bringing the subconscious to the conscious, which is really cool. And so, if you could draw an image that represents how you feel in this relationship, don't think, just go. And I remember one client creating this really powerful image of herself behind a brick wall and his back turned towards the wall. And on the brick, she wrote all the things that makes her keep her wall up and keeps her from being close. And that created avenue for talking and things like that. And so sometimes we don't even realize what's going on with us until we can express it in creative ways.
Yeah, well, I find that really interesting because as a relationship photographer, someone who takes pictures of people
Mhm.
in their ultimate state of what they want the relationship to look like. And then we do art and journal with it afterwards. We do a lot of it with the non-dominant hand
Oh,
because
yeah.
it accesses the subconscious. Do you do that also?
Yeah. No, I don't do that directly, but I do a lot of directives that access the subconscious as well. So that sounds really interesting.
So, like, what sort of stuff do you do to access subconscious?
So,
Obviously MTR, but besides for that,
yeah,
and
or
more in
yeah,
the arts part.
yeah, for sure. So I'll give you an example of a common technique where I will tell them to pick out a color either in their mind, or I'll lay out different markers or pens or pencils, or I could say, I want you to get your camera this week. And then the directive is I want you to write about a color you hate as if you were talking to it, a color that you don't like at all. Like that's the first part of it. Or go take pictures of things you really don't like. And so then, like after they've done the exercise, now I want you to have that color right back to you as if it was talking to you. And so what we're doing here is, the subconscious is things that they don't like, and it usually is going to be related to stuff within themselves. I can give you a personal example. When I first did this activity, I picked the color gray, and I was like, I don't like gray because you're cloudy and gloomy and you're depressing and you remind me of a storm, and I never know what you're going to do, if it's going to rain or not. And at the time, I was in a marriage that was very toxic and abusive and high conflict. And I hadn't really started sharing with people about it yet. And I hadn't started my own healing process around it. And when I saw that on paper, and I wasn't even thinking about it at the time, I remembered like getting choked up. And then the part where it was like, now right back to it. And I actually got to express what I wish I could express to my husband at the time, although I'm talking as if I'm a color, it really unlocked. And I just remember crying and not even realizing how much I was holding in, especially in that part back. And so that's one exercise that can be very powerful. And another one is just, I give people a pen and paper. It's called, free association exercise. And I will probably give them a topic based off of what we're working on. Like, it could be love, it could be intimacy, it could be depression, whatever it is. And I give them like 3 or 4 minutes. I have like the timer on my stopwatch. And I said, the only rule is that you just can't pick up your pen and you
A
just
stream
write.
of conscious sort of thing.
Yep, the stream of consciousness. Yep. Then we go through and we underline keywords they underline keywords that pop out, and we process and we discuss what came up from the subconscious with that. And then another directive I do with photography is I have stacks of photos, and you can lay them all out, probably about like 50 or 60. And like when I'm doing family work, I will have my client or the wife or the husband, whoever, pick out pictures that represent maybe how they feel about certain people in their family, or it could be that just stick out to them as if it seems like an important picture. And it's a range of like lots of different types of pictures, and then they'll pick it, and then we'll lay those out and see what the themes are and what the subconscious brings up that they don't even know why they were picking those pictures, and then it all comes to the surface, is really powerful. So those are just some of the examples of some of the subconscious things that I do.
Yeah, they're really similar to what I do, because what we do in CJA is like we'll journal just like what you wrote about those things, but when we do it with a non-dominant hand, because there's 2 hemispheres of the brain, right? Now each side of the brain is in charge of the opposite side of the body. The left side of the brain is in charge of logic stuff like math, reading, writing, and the right side of the brain is all the creative stuff, art, music, drama, and it's in charge of emotions and the subconscious. So whenever you're doing something creative or with your non-dominant hand, you get directly to your emotions and your subconscious. So it's really easy to access what you have there. So it's really interesting to see how it could work even without your non-dominant hand, but I wonder what would happen if you would try it with.
Yeah, that's very cool. I will definitely try that. I had not heard of doing it with the non-dominant hand, but that makes perfect sense with how the brain works.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Okay, now onto communication. If someone wants to create that safe space for communication, how do they go about that?
So vulnerability is important, and that's the only way to be able to move forward. So when working with couples, you got to really define, are you in speaker mode or listener mode? And when someone brings something to the table that they want to talk about, learning to just be the listener is super important so that safety is created. And if we know that a losing strategy is needing to be right or trying to retaliate, then we have to refrain from doing those things. And I tell the person who's bringing up whatever it is they need to bring up, like let's say it's something that the partner did that hurt them, or that they continue to do, they feel like is hurting the relationship or whatever it may be. For a lot of people, they have a hard time really getting to the core of their emotions with that. And so I tell them that you take some time and reflect and not just react off of how you're feeling. Do you feel sadness? Do you feel hurt? Do you feel rejection? What is it that you're feeling? And then having the courage to express that from the I, not you always do this and you always do that, but I felt hurt when, and this is how I experienced what happened, or whatever it may be. One of the prompts that for people who have a hard time bringing things up, I say to use is, use this or something like it till you figure out your own way, but being able to say, hey, I'm on the edge of vulnerability right now and I really have something important I want to talk about. So how you respond to me is going to be really important. And you kind of give them a heads up, like their response to this is important. And then being able to share, and the person just listening and making sure they're understanding what they're actually hearing. Because like 93, or might be even more than that, % of communication is nonverbal. The message that is sent isn't usually what's said. Tone, how you say it, how you package it. And so that listening piece and making sure you're really understanding, like that sound, being able to reflect back, like, did you mean this when you said that? And making sure you're getting it right. Then getting into problem solving mode, and then being able to switch gears of what was going on with that person, and now the listener becomes the speaker, and you do the same process. You're creating this comfort zone where everyone's allowed to feel and express and be vulnerable without there being retaliation or blame or being completely unfiltered to where there's name calling and things like that. So we work through how to create that safety zone, and everybody taking responsibility for their part of their negative cycles that they get into, because everybody has responsibility in what that looks like.
So it's about taking responsibility of, just said, of your negative cycles, of your actions and what you're saying,
and your feelings.
And your feelings, yeah, but at the same time allowing whatever your partner to say or feel to be okay.
Yep.
So there's
Giving
nothing wrong if that's how they're feeling now. Yeah.
Yep. Giving them permission to feel. So powerful when you give yourself permission to have your feelings and to not try to talk yourself out of them or minimize them or whatever. It's easier to give other people permission to feel, and vice versa. Everyone's allowed. No one's ever wrong for how they feel. They may have gotten the intention wrong, or they may have gotten the message wrong, but that doesn't change the fact that they had this internal signal go off about what happened. And like I said, relationships are emotional. And so it makes sense that we would have to work through our emotions about them. And it's so important that there's a space where each person has permission to feel and they're not judged for it. Because more than anything else, when breakups happen or, there's big dysfunction in the relationship, it doesn't always come out of, take out the biggies like affair, addictions, things like that. A lot of times it goes back to someone feeling judged for how they feel. One of the hardest things a couple can go through is the loss of a child, and the grieving about that. And there's like a huge statistic out there that at least 50%, or no, I think it's 70% of couples who've lost a child end up getting divorced. But it's not because of the grief, it's because they felt judged by their grief from their partner. Just as an example, that people having permission to feel and feeling supported about their feelings, whether you agree with it or not, is really important in relationships.
Yeah. Do you use any art with that to help people allow themselves to feel or process their emotions?
I do, depending on the couple. I think it depends on their openness. I think women in general are a little more open to doing some of the creative stuff, and because therapy in general is more natural for women than it is for men. But yeah, I definitely do. I do a lot of mandala work. Mandala is the circle. Within it can represent whatever you want it to be, but the circle of completion and what I'll have couples do is maybe like inside a mandala, draw or write words or whatever it may be. I don't really give many rules to create what it is that they're feeling as a couple. And then maybe on the outside of the mandala, they can draw or write things that they feel like is affecting the relationship. And so I'll do lots of different works around mandalas. I'll do lots of creative work, or creative writing work even with couples, and it's very powerful to have them share their art with each other and for someone to bear witness to someone's creativity in that way. And even with some of the photography stuff, having couples take pictures of, and a lot of times I'll assign stuff individually and then come back together and share. And so they're not doing that process always together, because it's important to get to the vulnerable work and let them hear and see and feel what the other is expressing through their art.
Yeah, it also shows they're each their own person, and some stuff they could do by themselves, and then some stuff they could do together.
Yeah.
I'm quite big on that also. But I'm just curious, if someone who's not in therapy, someone just listening now, wants to make a mandala with their partner, would that be beneficial, or do you think that should only be done in therapy?
Well, I think it would totally be beneficial. And there's some resources that maybe I can give to you in the note about mandalas that people could look into, but they could definitely do it on their own. I think that the way to know if it would be better to do it with a therapist is if there's not emotional safety. If one of them feels like there's not emotional safety with the other person, then that would definitely be something to do with the therapist. But if you feel that there's some emotional safety, but there's just some stuff going on, or maybe there's not anything going on, you just want to do something more creative and enhancing the relationship, I think they're great to do. So as long as there's emotional safety, between the two of them, then you can do it on your own for sure.
That's great. Now, just going back to the boundaries, how can you make sure that you have the right boundaries in place?
Yeah. So boundaries are where you end and someone else begins. And there's all different types of boundaries. There's physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, spiritual boundaries, mental boundaries, and they all look very different. But an indication that you might need some boundaries in the relationship is if you're continuing to feel anger, hurt, or resentment. And when that comes up, it's important to understand what it is that's going on and then how to set those boundaries. So let's say you and your partner are continuing to have the same conversation over and over, and you're just so resentful that this isn't getting resolved, but it's still continuing to happen. You may need for yourself be able to say, I can't continue to have this conversation. So until something changes behaviorally or whatever it is that's going on, I'm not talking about this anymore because it just continues to stress me out. Or if there's some physical aggression going on or some emotional aggression going on, being able to say that I'm not going to talk with you when you're talking to me that way. And if that continues, then I may go stay at a friend's tonight, or something like that. And boundaries aren't for punishment. They're to keep yourself safe and healthy and protected. And it helps teach people how to treat you. And sometimes there's emotional boundaries. I know, like, if you have a significant other, a family member who's going through maybe some deep depression or PTSD or trauma or things like that, that can be really taxing on you as well. And so emotional boundaries would be not taking on their emotional stuff, being intentional about not trying to fix what you can't fix and not letting their mood affect your mood. I have tell clients to imagine like there's this big bubble around you where their thoughts and feelings and words go splat on the outside of it. And what do you need to do to keep your peace and your calmness? This is an area where I think a lot of people don't realize how important it is to have boundaries in relationships, because everyone's their own person and you see people at not their best. And depending on the extent of it, it's important for you to know what your boundaries are and your non-negotiables too. Like, if your partner's continuing to go out and not spend time with you, and there's something going on that just makes you feel uncomfortable, being able to express that and what you need to feel more safe and to feel more secure in the relationship and boundaries around that.
Okay, so you said that if you're constantly angry, it's an indicator that you might need boundaries. Now, how do you know if that's something from you or something because of your partner?
Well, you're never wrong for how you feel.
That's true.
So you got to listen to yourself. And that doesn't mean that you need to react immediately off of how you're feeling, but you need to take some time and reflect. A lot of times anger can be an indication that there's some sort of injustice going on, something that maybe feels not fair, or could be that there's something deeper going on. A lot of times we numb some of our more painful emotions with anger. Like, is this because I'm actually really hurt or really sad? Especially for men, that's a more common thing that happens with them. And so taking time to really reflect on what it is and then being able to express that. Just an example of, let's say you're continuing to feel angry that your significant other, trying to think of a benign example, I don't know, that they won't take that next step with you in having kids, or there's hesitancy around some important issue, and every time you bring it up, they just kind of dismiss it or something like that. And you find yourself getting resentful and even getting angry about it. Stepping back and be able to communicate, that this is really important to you, and that if they're not wanting to move forward, that you need to know, but that it's important that you have space to have these conversations for you to feel close to them still. And that if your significant other continues to act in this way, that you're just going to feel more disconnected. And so now you're expressing how their lack of communication or their lack of moving forward with you is not helping the relationship, and what that means for you and what that means you're going to do. Or it could be that the way in which you're spoken to, you feel like your partner speaks to you in a condescending way, being able to say to that person that, hey, I'm not willing to have these conversations to you when you talk to me that way. I love you and I care about you, but I can't do that. So boundaries are very much from the eye, and boundaries really look different for every person. There's no set guideline for what your boundaries need to look like. You have to listen to your feelings. Now, if you're getting angry because someone else is setting a boundary with you, because you're asking if this was the problem with you or with them, then it's time to step back and evaluate. Are they being reasonable? What are you assuming about that person? And still being able to express why you're feeling angry about it. But if your partner set a boundary with you because you continue to talk to them a certain way, then you need to step back and consider what's more important, that they're setting this boundary or the relationship, that you need to be right or the relationship. And if you're going to be in a relationship, it's got to be the relationship. So
yeah.
That answers your question.
Yeah, and just because I love this so much, but do you bring the arts into setting boundaries or no?
Yeah. I mean, really anything that we talk through can be done creatively, especially if I have a couple who maybe one of them has a hard time containing themselves verbally. Stepping back and doing some art with them will help that person be able to say what they need to say, but in a safer way for the other person to hear it. So I may have them each have paper or something and to write or draw the things that their significant other does that makes them angry or hurts them, and then have them swap papers, and then process.
Yeah. And do it with a non-dominant hand, and the subconscious mind speaks for it. So it's really cool.
Yep.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much for coming here and speaking with us today.
Thank you. I'm so grateful.
Did you enjoy that episode? Could you do me a personal favor and subscribe and leave a review? It would mean a lot to me. Thank you so much and have an awesome day.